Are you a property company looking to get more views, leads, and deals from YouTube? Well, if you are, you're in the right place, because I work with some of the biggest property channels in the world, and I've helped them get millions of views, thousands of leads, and close millions of pounds worth of property. And I've simplified everything that I've learned into a simple 10-step framework that literally any property company can follow to succeed on YouTube. So in this video, I'm going to show you how we generate viral YouTube ideas in the property niche, how we turn all that traffic into paying clients, and we'll also show you how to get your viewers so hooked on your content that they start throwing money at you. So point number one is a pretty basic mistake, but literally 99% of property companies end up making it. So let me put this into a different context to bring it to life. So let's just imagine you wanted to create a new line of sports shoes. Would you A, go to the biggest company in the market and copy exactly what they're doing? Or B, try and create something unique and different? Now, I'm not sure how good your business acumen is, but I'm assuming you said B, because if you try and copy Nike or Adidas, you're literally just going to end up failing because you are becoming a smaller, worse version of the big competitor who already has all the brand recognition and advantage. And the exact same logic applies to YouTube. Why should somebody bother watching your content when they can just watch your competitors? Somebody with a bigger channel with more subscribers and potentially more social proof. Now, I don't say this to discourage you. I say this to encourage you to be different. Don't just copy what other people are doing, because that's just going to make you blend into the crowd, and you're not going to give your viewers a reason to watch you over your competitors. So then the question becomes, how can you be different? Well, here are a few questions to help you get started. The clients often give you feedback that you have a unique way of X. People often say, I am really Y. I've never seen property content presented in Z way. What extra value can I give that my competitors can't? What can I do better than them? What do I know that they don't? Basically, what makes me different from everyone else out there? And when you're thinking about this stuff and going through this process, I really want you to apply the phrase, good artists steal, they don't copy. So to give you an example, when I started on YouTube 10 years ago, I had a language learning channel. And 99% of the content in the language space was just somebody talking in front of a whiteboard. And I knew that I could do something different to stand out. So I constantly binged YouTube all day. I would watch the best YouTubers I could, and I noted down all the different elements that I liked from their different channels. Then I combined all of their styles together and adapted them to the language niche. And even though I never post on it, that channel still gets 15,000 views a month. And according to the comments, it's pretty well liked. So my question is, can you do the same thing in the property space? Can you mix 2 or 3 different styles from finance or business and bring them into the property niche and make something a bit different? Now, I put this as step number 1 in the process, because ideally you know this from the beginning, but this is also something that you can develop over time. For example, I didn't find the unique take on my channel until 10 videos in, for example. So take your time, make a couple of videos and try to get feedback from other people, and always have in the back of your mind, how can I be different? And then you're ready to move on to step 2, which arguably is even more important. And it's something that I find very surprising. Probably 75% of the property companies I speak to think they know who their ideal client is, but they don't. At least not well enough to make really good YouTube videos. And even the companies I work with that do have a good understanding of their ideal client somehow completely forget about it when they start researching YouTube videos, and they just revert to this, I'm going to copy what I see method. Basically, I saw this video do really well on YouTube, it got loads of views. But the question is your ideal client one of the people watching that video? And before we can actually answer that question with confidence, we need to dig into the psyche of your ideal client. We don't want to just understand how old they are and where they're from. We actually want to understand specific figures, fears, and goals, because that's going to help us create more targeted titles, thumbnails, and content. For example, most people think that the bigger the number you use in a thumbnail, the more clicks you're going to get. But we've tested this across multiple property channels in multiple countries, and time again, we see that the more relevant the figure, the better it performs. Specificity beats big promises. For example, how to make £1 million a year from property versus how to make £5,000 a month from property. Typically, the £5,000 a month is going to outperform 1 million because it's just more relevant and it's actually what people want to do. The first video is more likely to attract an experienced investor or somebody who wants to become a full-time investor. And that's why it's so important to understand exactly who you're trying to target. So in our agency, we use a short questionnaire that asks all of the key questions you need to understand in order to create really, really focused YouTube videos. And you can find that within our YouTube for Property framework, which is going to be linked in the description. It's going to help you really understand on a deeper level exactly who you're trying to target, what their goals are, how much money they want to make, how much money they are worried about losing, and just really dig into the psyche of our ideal client. And once you've gone through that and you're happy that you really understand your ideal client, the next step is going to help you create videos that are both viral and targeted, and that is understanding what gets clicks. So Pareto's law states that 20% of the work produces 80% of the results. And unfortunately, when it comes to YouTube, it's not the editing, the nice camera, or even the content that actually counts. Where you really want to be spending 80% of your time in the YouTube game is how to get clicks. Because you can create the greatest piece of content in the world, but if it doesn't have the right title and thumbnail, it's just going to flop. So we need to understand what our ideal client is going to click on. And the best way to do that is to look at what's already being clicked on, who is clicking on it, and why. So that will help you tap into the key words, images, colors that you need to include in your titles and thumbnails to make sure that your content always gets clicks. And in order to do this, you need to do what 99% of your competitors aren't: research. You need to spend some time going through different YouTube channels in the property niche and other niches to understand what people are actually clicking on. What figures, words, graphs, visuals, and colors are people using, and why? And then ask yourself, can you replicate this in a slightly different way and pull multiple different ideas into one? Because remember, good artists steal, they don't copy. So I'm going to show you a really quick example of how you might do this. Quick credit where credit is due. Ed Lawrence is the person that came up with this original format. So I have to give a shout out to Ed there. And we've just taken it and adapted it to the property niche. So there are 3 parts to this. And I'm going to talk you through the first one with a live example that I've already prepared for you. So what we really want to do here is understand the property niche in as much detail as possible. And we want to understand what people are clicking on, why they're clicking on it, and who ultimately is clicking on it as well, right? So there are some examples in here that I've just left in for you, but I'm going to talk you through these 2 in particular because, I've got the channel open here for you. So this is a guy who is famous within Australia for property investing. His name is Ravi Sharma. So if you're from Australia, you'll probably know him. And if I were wanting to come up with video ideas as somebody that's just starting out in the property niche, what I would firstly do is I would generally just have a look through the channel to start off with, just have a look at, okay, what he's talking about, etc. But then I would come over to popular as a first point of call. And then I would start just having a look at the most viewed videos and then transferring them back to our spreadsheet here. So how to retire filthy rich in Australia. And I would then start noting down the topics. So basically, what is it that he's talking about, and why are those topics getting more clicks? So that would be retire with property or retire in Australia. I would then have a look at the power words, as we call them. So what is it specifically about that title that's different or that's really grabbing your attention? So you need to just have a little bit of a think about this yourself to say, okay, well, why would that have made someone click? And it just takes a little bit of thinking on your own part there. So in this case, if I look at that objectively, has retire filthy rich in Australia, that's a really powerful sentence with retire filthy rich. I think that's the bit that's really doing the heavy lifting there. So retire filthy rich, I'd note that down, rich as well, probably. And then the other important thing is to really understand the thumbnail, because that's getting a lot of the click, right? So here I can see retire with only 2 properties, with 2 properties there. And that again is quite a big statement. So that would be noted down here in terms of the title thumbnail patterns. So I can start to understand retire filthy rich in Australia and retire with 2 properties. Okay. Now, what's really, really important, there are 2 things here. Firstly is that you're probably looking at this thinking, I could literally just screenshot a lot of this or copy a lot of this into ChatGPT and then ask it to spit out ideas for you. You can, 100%. The thing is, it makes such a difference, and I make everybody on my team do this literally on a weekly basis. If you can understand yourself and spend the time going through this and like actually manually putting this into a spreadsheet, it makes such a difference to your understanding of what works and what doesn't. And then when you go away and use AI and use tools like that, you can actually have a look at it objectively and say, okay, well, what that's given me, I've now got 3, 5, 10 options, whatever, and I know which ones are going to work because I personally understand it. And so that's going to help you make AI more of your assistant as opposed to relying on it to hopefully come up with some good ideas. Whereas you're the person with all the experience in the niche and you've actually gone away and done this research, right? So it's really, really important to do this manually, even if it's a pain in the backside. And the second thing is here, it's so important to not just grab this idea, particularly if you're based in Australia, and be like, oh, retire filthy rich in Australia, retire with 2 properties. Oh, that's a great video. I'm just going to copy that and do it myself. That is a surefire way to be second best and for stuff not to work very well, because they've already seen it on Ravi Sharma's channel. And so now you're just going to copy and do, like it. Just don't do that. Granted, if you're based in the UK, you can maybe get away with it, but I would still say take that idea. And you want to do this with not just one idea, but as many as you can. So literally try and get hundreds of ideas out here. And then once you have the understanding of multiple different power words, multiple different titles, thumbnails, etc., that have worked, then what that allows you to do is say, okay, well, how to retire filthy rich in UK using property? Then I can potentially use that title because that could be interesting. But then rather than retire 2 properties, could it be 1 property? And then rather than using the exact same thumbnail, could we not slightly tweak that and use something else that we know that has worked, like with a graph or whatever it might be, to just make it look and feel different? And yeah, as opposed to just copying blindly, because that, yeah, just doesn't tend to work very well. So whatever you do and you go away and you steal these little bits from other people's channels, always really try to make something unique at the end of the day, because as long as if it's unique, plus it's got all of these power words in, it's still proven to get clicks, right? So that's what the ultimate aim of this is. And then the other thing that you need to be careful of is, so if I were going down here, the next one obviously on the list would be the recession is here. What will happen to Australian real estate prices? So I'd take that, copy it across to our spreadsheet. So this is where it's important to understand why and who is clicking on this, right? So the recession is here. What will happen to Australian real estate prices? Okay. Then we can see the thumbnail is prepare downward graph in red. So I'm just going to flip back for reference. Okay, great. That's got a lot of views, but who's clicking on that and why are they clicking? So ultimately, they're clicking because they've heard there's a recession and they're interested in Australian property prices, but that doesn't mean that they want to invest in property. So this would be a classic example of in the content funnel for real estate, where that's going to drive traffic, but we're not 100% sure if that's going to drive the right type of person and if that's going to drive buyers. This probably will, because you're teaching somebody how to invest in property and they're clicking on that because they're interested in real estate investing. Whereas this is more of a traffic video that's people are and granted, investors are interested in house prices, but so are lots of other people. So you just need to be aware of, if you're going, because there are lots of channels like this, if you come onto a channel, go to popular, and you see that everything on the top row is just recession, the crash, house price crash, mortgage crisis, etc., then you need to just take that with a little bit of a pinch of salt and say, you can still note them down because the packaging obviously is working, but then you want to go further down the list as well and start to have a look at other things that have worked. So yeah, like great, enters recession, passive income, like passive income in Australia. Interesting. Like, is it something about passive income in real estate? Does that drive the right person? So again, you need to ask yourself that question. Again, you want to look at this stuff and understand, not just blindly copy what's worked, but understand, okay, could that idea work for my channel? And does that make any sense for my channel, right? So if I were having a look here, like there's something about this, right? So buy 5+ properties faster, how to beat 99% of real estate investors in 2025. Again, that's very targeted and specific for investors. That's more of a conversion video, right? It's unlikely that a random person is going to click on that. So again, I'd copy that one across. Bam. Interesting. And then buy 5+ properties faster. So I'd be writing like buy properties faster. So it's interesting. Like, are people interested in buying properties faster, or is it buy 5 properties? Sorry. Yeah, just trying to understand what is it about that video specifically that's got someone clicking. And you can't really understand that from just doing one video. So that's why it's important to have multiple different videos. You can understand if you see buy 5 properties faster and you see that across multiple channels working, then it's more likely to be the buying 5 properties as opposed to buying them faster, right? So that's what we're trying to understand in terms of the pattern spotting. What is it that's getting people clicking? Okay, and I would literally, you can come down, you can also use VidIQ, which will show you in terms of like the average performance, how certain videos have performed. And I would literally get anything that's kind of performing 2 times plus, particularly if it's a video that's going to convert for you and drive clients. So I'm just going to come down here a little bit. I think that's what I wanted to, yeah. Again, this one to me would be interesting, even though it's not like the highest viewed. How to quit your 9-to-5 with real estate investing. Again, if that's an ideal client, there's something about that that's worked. So again, I would write it down, because it's not all about views, obviously, right? It's again, we want to make sure that we're creating content that is also going to drive clients. So yeah, I would do that with as many channels and as many people as you can. Just the more you do, the better you're going to understand what will work and what won't. And then the next one is actually quite easy, if I'm honest, is that you would go to, so this first part allows you to understand the property niche. And this second one will allow you to understand YouTube in general, and if there are any patterns that we can take and adapt to the property niche. And this is a way to actually come up with ideas that are that are unique, right? So I wouldn't go too far as in going to try and find really, really creative channels and that type of thing. Typically, I would look at the business space. So I'd look at people that are really, really good at YouTube, like Alex Hormozy, Charlie Morgan, Ben Heath is pretty good. The finance channels as well. So any of the big kind of finance and business channels, and have a look at what's working on their channels. And then just literally write down videos and titles that have got a lot of views. And then just try to work out, okay, well, is there anything about their title and about their video idea that I can just adapt to the property niche that would make it sound really, really interesting? Particularly paying attention to those power words, right? So how to make money so fast it feels illegal. Like, that just sounds like so fast it feels illegal. There's something about that illegal part that's probably driving curiosity there, right? It sounds different. So how to find property deals so good they sound illegal would be a potential property video that I'd think about there. How the top 1% build wealth in layers. How the top, and again there, I think it's the top 1%, the wealthy people are interested in, that they're curious about how they do that. So then I would start coming up with video ideas like how the top 1% of property investors, I don't actually like that title that much, but beat everyone else, or how the top 1% of property investors XYZ. So something that's relevant to your avatar, right? So, or how the wealthiest 1% or the richest 1% invest secretly in property, or something like that, using that top 1% premise and adapting it to the property niche. That would be something that I think would work really, really well. So that gets us, we then understand our own niche. We understand what's working on YouTube in the broader sense. And then finally, this is actually the easiest way to come up with video ideas, and it's a proven format. Apologies. So you can literally just go to your own channel if you have one and look at some of the highest performing videos, and then work out, okay, well, there was something about that got people clicking and got people watching, and ideally also got people turning into clients on the back end. What was it about that format, and is there a way that we can take that format and adapt it to create a series in a similar style? So in this example, this is a really high performing video, the worst 4 places to buy a house in 2025. I'd probably just use to buy a house here as well, but like the 10 cheapest places to buy a house, the 10 most expensive places to buy a house, the 3 most undervalued cities to buy a house. So really just taking that format that's worked and adapting it again, and how you then adapt it and how you know which words to insert here are going to be based on your niche research. So if you've seen that, the word faster gets clicked on all the time, or cheaper or more expensive or dangerous or whatever it might be, is that, okay, well, now I know that works in our niche, and I know that this format tends to work well on my channel. So how can I take what I understand about a niche, mix that with what's worked already on my channel, and turn that into a series that you can just do over and over again? Because that's going to help. It's a very proven way to get views on your channel, because it's something that people have already clicked on. So that's one of my favorite ways to come up with video ideas. And a lot of people don't end up doing it because they feel like they're repeating themselves or copying, which is really something you need to get out of your head. So yeah, they're really the 3 ways to come up with proven video ideas for the property niche. And if you apply them, and I really, really would implore you to spend as much time as you can doing this within reason, because the more you understand about the niche and what works, the easier it's going to be for you to come up with video ideas and understand what's going to work and what won't. And then also what that will allow you to do is, if you genuinely just sit down and do this for a couple of hours, you can come up with 3 months worth, if not a year's worth of content in one go. And it genuinely saves you a lot of time and gets you out of that repetitive week by week trying to come up with the video idea, hoping that it works, and it kind of flops and you don't know why. If you sit down and spend some time doing this, you will understand why and what is going to work in the future. So really, really important task that I get my team to do on a daily, weekly basis. Okay, so now we have the ideas we want to work on. The next thing we need to think about is our content funnel. Now, there are 2 things that you need to be careful of here. So firstly, there is a trend of people saying that you don't need views in order to get clients. And I get where the logic comes from, because if you focus on views and attract a load of people who will never buy your product, then that's a waste of time. So if you're given the choice between views and qualified views, you should take less qualified views. And I completely agree with that, because in theory, that makes complete sense. However, it's interesting how most of the people who say this have massive channels. So their non-viral targeted videos are still getting thousands of views. And that's where you need to be a little bit careful with this advice, because most people watching this aren't in that comfortable position. Now, before I explain how we tackle that issue, you need to understand the second peculiarity about the property niche. If you check out any property channel around the world, you'll see an interesting distinction between two types of content: news-based content and educational content. And there's something you need to be very wary of here. If you search for the highest viewed property videos of all time, nearly all of them will be related to some form of crash, house price update, or something negative and horrible, which is logical because after reviewing tens of thousands of property videos, I can confirm that people much prefer clicking on a video that talks about a housing crash over a housing boom. They love you confirming their fear and their conspiracy theories. And there are channels that solely produce this type of content. However, if you take a step back and think about it, who's clicking on those videos and why are they clicking? Yes, it might get you a lot of views, but if your channel solely acts as a home for fearmongers, it's unlikely they're ever going to turn into a client. That said, take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt, because property news is something that your ideal clients will be interested in. And if you purely focus on very technical property topics, it's going to be very, very hard to really generate any type of meaningful traffic. So basically, to summarize, after testing this across loads of different property channels of different sizes for multiple years, I've noticed that you need a mix of two things: traffic and conversion. So you need to strike the right balance between broader news-based content and then conversion content. So for example, just roughly in a batch of 6 videos, you would want to have half the content which has some form of FOMO or urgency attached to it, and the other half to just be evergreen educational content that's going to help convert those viewers into buyers. So that content remains relevant 3, 5, 10, or even 20 years from now, potentially. However, regardless of whether you're creating news or conversion content, you need to always keep asking yourself, will my ideal client be interested in this topic? And if not, don't make the video. Because to go back to our previous point, views are pointless if they're attracting the wrong person. So if you pull those 2 videos up again onto the screen and ask yourself that question, would this attract the right audience? The answer would be yes. Now, granted, the first topic is going to attract a broader audience, but our ideal client is going to be part of that broader audience. And we can use the traffic from that first video to funnel our ideal client into the conversion video. And there's one example where I did this with Property Hub that absolutely blew up one of their videos and generated a lot of leads. On release, the video you're seeing on screen got about 10,000 views, but it was a really good lead generator. Then we released this video a few weeks later, and the call to action for that video was to watch the conversion video. And the conversion video got literally 20,000 views overnight and generated a lot of leads. So that's why it's really important to have both traffic and conversion, because it can be really, really powerful and the two can work in harmony. But before you run off and try and start making videos, you need to get this next piece of the puzzle sorted. Otherwise, you're going to be pouring all your hard work and money down the drain. So when it comes to YouTube, this is what 99% of property companies' sales funnels look like: a leaky bucket. Even some of the biggest property channels in the world get this piece of the puzzle very, very wrong, and it genuinely costs them millions in revenue. So let's start by explaining the core problem. Even if your YouTube channel does get views, you won't make any money if you haven't got a clear pathway to turn your views into leads, your leads into calls, and your calls into deals. And here's what I see most people doing. They create a video, they have about 10 different links in their bio and description, or worse, they use the dreaded linky form. And when they make a video, the CTA and the lead magnet is basically just an afterthought that they chuck together at the last minute. So the CTA goes somewhere at the end of the video and nobody hears it. So what does that mean? Well, even if the content is really valuable, most people's retention graphs look something like this. In other words, only 20 to 30% of your audience are actually going to hear the call to action. And then rather than providing them one clear path to take, we're expecting them to pick the best way to go. So here's what happens. They click on your video, they might get some value from it, but there's no obvious call to action, so they click on your Instagram because that's the first thing that's linked. They start scrolling and see a beautiful video of a cat that they just have to click on, and then decide that, or realize that they forgot to post a photo of what they had for breakfast that morning. And obviously life can't go on until that is done, and boom, they're gone. Whereas a well-structured YouTube sales funnel should look something like this. Lead magnet and call to action decided before you film. Where are we sending people? The call to action and lead magnet are very specific to the video, so the call to action is really, really high. They have one link to click on, maximum 2. These links send them to a dedicated landing page where we capture their email and ideally phone number, or they book a call directly. No other tabs or social media for them to click on. One video, one call to action. And we can talk all we want about leads and viral videos, but honestly, this is the stuff that actually makes you money, and it can get you 20 times more leads if you really think about it and put this stuff into place. So this is really, really important. That's why the first thing we do when we work with a property channel is to set up and audit the funnel, because if you're sending traffic to a leaky funnel, you're literally just pouring water down the drain, or you're wasting money, basically. And unfortunately, I say this from experience, I have literally helped the company generate hundreds of thousands of views without a good back-end sales system in place to capture interest and capture leads. And all of that time, energy and money was just completely wasted because it wasn't pushed anywhere. So I say this from a place of pain. Pay attention to your sales funnel. Now that I've just explained it, it might be slightly more obvious what I'm doing, but if you want access to our templates and the sales funnels that we use, you can click on the link in the description and they're all in the YouTube property playbook. And once you have that all set up, I'm going to teach you how we're able to make property channels go viral time after time after time. Okay, so I think this might be the most undervalued skill in the world of YouTube, particularly in the property niche, because if you can come up with good ideas, you're going to be miles ahead of the competition. And to start with, there are 3 parts to a good idea: the title, the thumbnail, and how they work together. So let's start with the thumbnail. So typically the thumbnail is going to be the first thing that somebody sees, and it's going to be what stops the scroll. Then they'll look at the title to confirm whether or not they want to click. So basically your thumbnail needs to work alongside the title to create some form of curiosity gap, like this one. Basically, when you look at this thumbnail, if you're interested in the topic, you're going to end up asking yourself a series of questions. What just changed? Why is it over for landlords? Why is Keir Starmer laughing? What has he done? It basically generates so many questions that you need to click if you're interested in the topic in the first place. So whenever you're coming up with a video idea and a title and thumbnail, you need to make sure that the viewer is asking themselves questions and make sure it instills some form of emotion, whether that's fear, desire, urgency, curiosity, or ideally a mix of all 4. However, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making in the property niche is this. They take the title, stick it on the thumbnail, add their face, and Bob's your uncle. But in that case, you're literally using 1% of the thumbnail's potential. The only time that actually works is when the topic is very SEO heavy. In other words, where the person is looking for that particular video or looking for that particular topic, like this video, which is now the top ranking video for mortgages in New Zealand, which was the aim of the video because we wanted people to find our video when they searched for mortgages. And there they can see, I'm looking for mortgages. This is about mortgages. Click. That's the only exception to the rule, basically. And in order to come up with good ideas, titles, and thumbnails, once again, I'm afraid to say it's about research. It's understanding what people have clicked on before and then trying to take all of those different elements and make your own. However, it's really important not to try and make your idea clever. What I mean by this is that you only have 1 microsecond to get somebody to click. So if you need time to understand what you're trying to say, or you're trying to make some form of metaphor or joke within your title and thumbnail, it's a bad thumbnail. The viewer needs to be able to scan the image and understand what's going on in a millisecond. And I have an example that I'm going to put on screen now, which shows 2 different thumbnails and how they performed and makes this point really, really well. Now, one of them has a big piece of copy saying, avoid this trap. Nice and simple. The other says brochure versus reality. In other words, that's what the building looks like on the brochure, but then in reality, you're living next to a motorway. The second one is visually much more interesting and clever, but it takes a second to understand. And in that split second, you've lost the click. And this is something you need to be really careful of, because when you're working on your own thumbnails, you have time to analyze them. You have time to look at them and work out if you like them or not. Whereas for the viewer, they literally have a millisecond. So you need to put yourself in the shoes of the viewer, think like the viewer, and run your thumbnails through that millisecond scan, as opposed to sitting there and spending hours on them and thinking they're really, really clever, because 9 times out of 10 they aren't. Now, that is one of the biggest mistakes that I quite often see people making, but there are lots of others. So I'm just going to show you and talk you through a document that I share with my internal team on the most common mistakes that I see when they send me thumbnails. So ideally we want the thumbnail to stand alone, make you want to click on it, and then you look at the title to back that up. So if I look here, from scratch, 31 steps to your first property, that sounds kind of interesting, but it's not going to really grab my attention. The words from scratch are just a little bit boring, if I'm honest. Number 3, the copy is too long. So here we can see worst mistakes in 2025. There's graphics here, and that's too packed in here. Like, there's just too much going on this. I can't read the text properly. So in this case, we'd either want just one sentence there, like one line, and get rid of that, or we're going to need to simplify down the whole thumbnail in general. So this links in nicely to the next point, which is hierarchy. So when you come up with a thumbnail, you ideally want one key visual focus, one hero of the image that's really, really obvious and is going to make somebody want to click. And here we kind of have 3 all battling for attention at the same time. So we have the text, the arrow, and the building. And for me, it's not 100% clear which one I need to really be looking at. There's too much focus on all 3 of them, and ideally we just want one key focus and one thing that somebody can lock in on straight away. Number 5, nice and simple, there's not enough color contrast on the thumbnail. So although we have green, yellow, red here, which is quite nice, then this is kind of a blacky gray kind of, yeah, we could definitely simplify the colors here to maybe make that background all black and then have him in a white shirt or something like that. But we really want the colors to pop more, because at the moment this is feeling a little bit bland. Number 6, no clear reference to the result or target audience. We have a guy with graph savings age change made here. I don't know what industry this refers to. I don't know what niche we're working in here. I don't know, yeah, like how much money are we talking about? There's just not enough specificity. It just feels a bit meh. You could literally take that thumbnail and put it into any niche around the world and it would probably not work, I should say. We really need more specificity here in the thumbnail. Number 7 is a little bit of a weird one, but it's too creative. When you look at a thumbnail, ideally within the first microseconds of looking at it, you want to understand exactly what's going on and have a reason to click. Whereas if I look at this, I can see brochure reality. And if I take a second to think about that, then, okay, what you're telling me is that that is what I see in the brochure and that's what it looks like in reality. But the thing is, my brain needs a little bit of time to process this. And we've seen time and time again with thumbnail tests, I say specifically in the property niche because that's what we know, but I know that this probably applies to most other niches, that this is going to perform worse than something really, really simple and just literally a guy with text or a guy with a graph and some form of punchy copy. So the next time you're trying to come up with a creative idea for a thumbnail, just stop, because it's probably not going to work. And I just want to clarify that you can still be creative in the way that you present a concept or present a design. So there are lots of different creative ways you could present this information, for example. However, don't try and be clever, basically, because if you try to be clever, your audience won't be clever enough to understand you. So just keep it simple. Number 8, don't assume the information that you put on the thumbnail needs to be in the video. Just choose something that's going to get the click. So what we're talking about here is clickbait. And lots of people assume that if you use copy or a graph or something that's not in the video, that's going to be considered as clickbait. What clickbait actually is that if somebody clicks on a video and then the video has nothing to do with what they've clicked on and they feel cheated, or you're baiting them into clicking and then it's just a load of crap, that's when it's clickbait. However, if you take the general concept and the general idea of a video and then come up with a separate clickable title and thumbnail that's still very much to do with the topic, very much to do with the niche, and gives a lot of that similar information, that's not clickbait. So if you are making a video that's like the 8 signs or 10 signs of something, you don't have to choose one of those signs and make that the title and thumbnail. You can take, what I recommend you do is take a step back. Again, look at what's working in the niche, what are people clicking on, how can I phrase this in a way that's going to get someone clicking, and go with that option as opposed to trying to force one of those signs to be on there, because 9 times out of 10 it's not that clickable and it's not going to work. And number 9 actually feeds back into this thumbnail again, is the curiosity gap. So when you look at your title and thumbnail, is there something that I need to understand? Like, does that drive intrigue and curiosity when I see that? If not, then you're probably not onto a winner. So in this case, 8 signs you should retire earlier than you think, you saved too much. Well, just that on its own, like, what do you mean I saved too much? Like, how is that possible? That doesn't make any sense. And so that backs up the title and it makes it something that people are going to want to click on. And I think that video is now on 500,000 roughly views. And then number 10 is the most important thing, and it's one of the biggest mistakes that I see property companies making, that when they try to copy somebody else's thumbnail, you need to really understand why that thumbnail is being clicked on. So in this case, 2025, that bar, if you were to replace Iman Gadzhi, somebody who's very, very famous and lots of people click on just because it's him, if we put you in that thumbnail, are people still going to click? Or if you replaced him with some boring accountant or something, is that still a clickable video? Disappear and come back unrecognizable, 7 rules to change your life. The only reason people are clicking on that video is because they know that he's famous, he's made loads of money, and that when he says disappear and come back unrecognizable, he's got all the social proof and all the credibility to actually be able to say that, and people already know that he's rich. 9 times out of 10, if you try to copy that thumbnail, it's going to be an absolute flop, because there's nothing else interesting about that thumbnail apart from him being on it, and it looks visually quite interesting. So the next time you try to copy from a big channel and you think that your thumbnail looks interesting, put yourself into that thumbnail and then take a step back and understand, is that still clickable? Is that still interesting with me in there? So the most important thing you can do is just to keep it simple. However, simple doesn't mean easy. So let me ask you a question. How long did it take you to come up with a name for your business? Was it the first name you came up with, or did you go through multiple different options until you found the winner? Well, for 99% of people watching this video, I hope it will be the latter, because you need to brainstorm, iterate, wait, sleep on it, check again until you finally get that perfect version that you feel like really suits you. Now, I'm not saying you need to spend days coming up with just one video idea, but the title and thumbnail are the most important thing about the video. And to give you an idea, newspaper journalists spend 80% of their time working on the headline and 20% actually writing the article. And we should be following the same principle for YouTube, unfortunately. In other words, when you think you've got the winning title, don't settle on it straight away. Run it through ChatGPT, get 50 to 100 different versions of it. Take one word from the beginning, move it to the end, change the keywords that you like, add in some more power words, and just play around with the title until you really feel like you've got a banger. And if you want a system to actually check whether your video idea is good or not, there'll be a link in the YouTube Property Playbook. And that's the tool that we use on a day-to-day basis to test videos in the property niche to work out whether we want to use them or not. Now, you don't need every single video to fulfill all of these points, but it will help you to think critically about your ideas and push you to make them better and add a couple of elements in. So firstly, big. Is the claim that we're making actually big enough for people to care? Is it important enough for people to care? For example, how to make $1 a day is not a big claim. No one cares. Whereas how to make $100,000 a day, suddenly I'm interested. I mean, I'd probably change the title, but yeah, it's something that people might care about, right? Easy. Does this claim sound easy? Could I achieve it, or does this sound impossible? Does it sound like too much faff and too much effort? Ideally, we want stuff to sound easy. New. Is this something that I haven't heard before and can't find anywhere else? Is this novel information? Safe. Is this something proven? Is there a strategy, a blueprint, a plan, a system? How can I be sure that this thing's going to work? Intriguing. Is this genuinely interesting for our avatar? Is this something that piques your interest? Specific. Generic titles only work for big channels. In other words, if you made £934,360, put that, not 1 million, okay? Particularly for smaller channels, it's going to work much better. Relatable. Will this figure or phrase resonate with our target audience? In other words, will this feel like something they can achieve? Useful. Is this information useful for our avatar? You'd be surprised how many people forget to put this one in. Urgent. Does it give our viewer a sense of FOMO? If they don't click, are they going to miss out on something? Do they need to click this? Unique. Is this something that everyone's kind of heard before and we're just copying? Or is this a unique, different way of phrasing things with different words that just sounds and looks a bit different? And then finally, not on the checklist, but is the title within the 50 to 60 character limit? Ideally, you want the core question or theme to be within the 50. And if you have a bracket or additional sentence, it can go in afterwards. So say, for example, now I haven't actually got a title written down, so I'm making this up on the spot, but the rich are getting richer off this tax loophole. If that fitted within the 50 and then you had here's how at the end, that's not really a problem. Whereas if here's how the rich are getting richer off this tax loop, like you're losing the tax loophole at the end, and then that becomes a problem. Okay, so now you know how to get somebody clicking on your video, but how do you get them hooked and get them watching all the way to the end? Because the longer you can keep somebody watching, the more watch time it gives your video, the more ads that YouTube can show to people, which means more trust is built with your potential client, and it signals to YouTube that your videos are of high quality. And that's where scripting comes in. So most YouTube channels in the property space have retention graphs that look like this, whereas a lot of our videos look like this. So what's the difference? Well, I'm going to explain how to make scripts that keep people hooked until the end. And I'm also going to give you a live example of how to make people binge your content. Now, the first thing that I think I should mention is that you're not Alex Hormozi. There are very few people on the planet that have the same ability that he does to just pick up a camera, speak into it, and sound so eloquent and not make any mistakes. And it's quite unlikely that you're one of them. I'm sorry. And I'm definitely not one of them because I need to prepare absolutely everything that I'm going to say. Otherwise, I turn into some stuttering mess on camera. It's not good. Now, I'm not saying that you don't have to script everything word for word. Most of the people that we work with don't. Some of our clients use full scripts, some of them don't. But the most important thing is really to just respect your viewers' time and plan what you're going to say. If you repeat yourself too much, people are going to tune out. So just map out the points you want to make, the examples you want to give, and make sure you keep things nice and concise. And regardless of whether you're creating a full script or not, there are a couple of things that you can use to keep your viewers hooked. So the first thing is you need an intro that does 3 things. Gets me hooked from the beginning, gives me proof that you know what you're talking about, and sets up the value that I'm going to get from your video. I would typically keep it to about 30 seconds and just try to avoid waffle. So what I'm going to do is now just run my intro again so you can see how I constructed it. Are you a property company looking to get more views, leads, and deals from YouTube? Well, if you are, you're in the right place, because I work with some of the biggest property channels in the world, and I've helped them get millions of views, thousands of leads, and close millions of pounds worth of property. And I've simplified everything that I've learned into a simple 10-step framework that literally any property company can follow to succeed on YouTube. So in this video, I'm going to show you how we generate viral YouTube ideas in the property niche, how we turn all that traffic into paying clients, and we'll also show you how to get your viewers so hooked on your content that they start throwing money at you. So what I'm doing there is I'm calling out the exact person that I'm speaking to, so property companies, I'm highlighting a key pain point that you likely have. So lack of views, leads, and deals. And then I'm very quickly giving my credibility through visual examples of the people that I've worked with, the results that I've gotten them. And then I'm speaking to the key pain points that most property companies have. And afterwards, I'm just basically letting you know what you're going to get from the video and what you can expect. And I know that they're pain points that you're likely feeling, so they should keep you hooked most of the way through. There's lots of advice online about you have to make the first sentence exactly the same as the title. It has to visually match and all this sort of stuff. Honestly, made loads and loads of videos. I haven't necessarily seen massive correlation between that. I just find that particularly for business, investment channels, that type of thing, as long as the title and thumbnail match up what I say in the intro and what I'm going to be talking about so that you feel as if there's a strong correlation, and then I immediately deliver value within the video, then you're going to stick around and you're going to watch it. And honestly, there are loads of different ways you can structure intros to keep them fresh and not always sounding the same. And again, in the YouTube Property Framework, I've linked our intro examples and frameworks that we use, so you can click on that to get access to them. Now, when it comes to the actual content, it's going to sound weird, but you can genuinely include whatever you want. There isn't one style fits all. Some people are extremely value-led, just say it like it is, there's no joking around. Some focus more on storytelling, some do screen shares, some people run all around town showing properties. You can genuinely do whatever you want. However, I have noticed on YouTube there is a system to making a good point. So I really would advise thinking about this system. You don't have to do it for every single video and every single point, but just to keep it in the back of your mind when you're trying to explain something. So ideally at the beginning of each point, you want to re-hook your viewer, get me interested in the content again. Why should I watch this point? What's in it for me? In other words, you're setting them up and getting them interested in what you're about to tell them and making them want to watch till the end of the point. And then rather than just explaining the point, you can go into the misconception or the problem. In other words, the thing that everyone thinks is right or the thing that everyone gets wrong. By explaining what everyone gets wrong, again, you're making me care because it's quite likely that I'm making that mistake. Then ideally we want to use an example. So using some form of story, example, metaphor will make the videos much, much more relatable and memorable. So the best way to do this is actually to use personal stories rather than just explaining through a load of facts. If you can put that into some form of story-led, whether it's via a client or somebody that's made up just to make an example of the point, 9 times out of 10 it's just going to sound a bit easier on the ears and it's just going to be easier to understand. Then we go into the solution. So don't just highlight the problem. Make sure that there is a very clear solution to that problem, and then you explain exactly what that solution is. And then the final point, and this honestly is the difference between a good YouTube video and a bad YouTube video and a good point and a bad point. It's the value and the actionable advice that you give to somebody. So there are very few places that you can literally get hours and hours of expert advice for free. So you really want to make sure that you use that to its full potential and don't just give basic generic explanations and leave the point at the problem and the explanation. The more that you can explain exactly how you do it, how you have done it in the past, go through your personal stories, go through your personal examples and actually explain what you would do in that situation, the exact steps, the websites, the tools that they need to use. That's actually what people are looking for. They really want to feel as if you've been where they've been and just talk them through exactly what they need to do, because that is going to make the difference between a really banging YouTube video and something that somebody comes away feeling like they've got so much value versus something that was kind of interesting, but they're not exactly sure what to do next. Now, this is going to help you structure the content in a format that keeps people engaged. However, if you really want people to binge your content, you want to give them a reason to keep on watching. And I'll show you how this works with a live example at the end of the video. And that in itself is an example of a retention hack. It's like a retention hack within a retention hack within a retention hack. I need to get a life. Now, for this next part, I'm going to talk you through the ideal camera setup you're going to need for filming videos in the property niche. And in order to make this nice and simple for myself, I'm going to cut to a previous video that I've made about this so that I don't need to film it again. And if you want any of the links that I mentioned within that video, so the lights or the microphone or whatever it might be, that's all within the YouTube Property Playbook. So the first thing that we're going to start with, which is really, really simple, is just the audio. And I've linked the mic below, which is the Shure MV7. It's the best mic for this type of thing that I found. Easy to use. Don't waste your time looking for another one, just go with that. I mean, it's not best practice necessarily to have this on a podcast on, but I use it for my Zoom calls. I just find it practical, and everything that I have here. So I used to actually have a production studio. We made videos for like big publishing companies and governments and stuff. But this is all made in a way that is just practical. I can come in, plug it in, and I can start filming. So yeah, and I think a lot of the people watching this are going to be in a similar situation. So that's why I'm kind of using this and explaining this. So good mic, easy to use, and very, very simple to set up. So go with that one. If you are sitting at a desk, I'd use a podcast arm as well because it's just easy, or you can have one that's on like a stand. Then the second most important thing is going to be the lights. I'm sitting with a window, so I'm getting a lot of natural light in. Plus I've got 2 big light panels above me. And that is the second most important thing after good audio, is that you're well lit and look professional. There are lots of ways that you can make it look more cinematic. Honestly, for the content that you're creating, it's just, you want people to get a professional first impression. So as long as it looks conform, so there's not like massive shadows anywhere on your face, that's the main thing that you're trying to get from the lighting. I'll quickly mention the camera as well. So I have obviously a really nice, from the production days, a really nice camera. However, you're absolutely fine filming on an iPhone, particularly if you've got the good audio and the nice lighting. An iPhone will do a really, really good job for you as well. And then if you want to get a DSLR, you can do. That's really up to you, your budget and actual practicality, because filming on an iPhone is probably easier to set up. After you've got your audio, your lights and your camera, honestly, the rest of this that I'm going to explain is optional. If you are kind of more advanced and you have time and you have the space, then I would advise these things. But if you are on a lower budget, or you just don't have the room, then honestly, don't worry about this stuff. Okay. So the things that are important, so to keep on lighting. So that lamp is there for a reason. That adds, firstly, some visual interest in the background, but secondly, it adds a little bit of a light on the back of my head. There's a light up there, which firstly gives light to the back of my head slightly, but then also it gives more light to the back of the room. And all that does really is just to provide more depth to the shot, and it just makes the whole thing look more professional. But if you're filming in a well-lit room, or for example, you've got a window behind you, it will do a very, very similar thing. So you might not need that backlight, but effectively that's kind of best practice, is to have 2 lights up here and then some form of light on the back of your head, just to add depth to the shot, to make it again look a bit more professional. So there's a reason that I'm sat so far away from the back wall, and that is for depth, right? And what that does is it just gives separation between the camera, me, and that back wall. And what that does is it creates that blurry effect in the camera, which again just feels a bit more professional and looks nicer. Then in terms of the other stuff that you're seeing here, the plant, the other plant, and that painting, which is a little bit squiff, I'm realizing as I'm pointing it out, they're literally just there for visual effect and some visual interest, because otherwise it would just be like white, and that doesn't look very interesting. If you are filming, as I mentioned, with like a window behind you, that does again add like a natural way to do it. But you ideally just want, if you're filming in a room like I am at the moment, just something behind you so that it doesn't just look really plain and boring. But again, that's optional. If you don't have the options to do it, it's not the end of the world. And that's for YouTube, literally it. You don't need to overcomplicate stuff. And the more of those things that you can incorporate into the shot, the better. But as long as I mentioned, you've got good audio, you've got nice lighting that looks professional, that kind of is conform across your face, and you've got a decent camera or iPhone to be filming on, then honestly, you're more than set to go. The most important thing is that first impression that you're giving to somebody. So if they land on the content, they can see that, okay, this guy is taking the time to film in a nice studio, or get the studio set up nicely, or, you know, he's taken a nice shot outside with a professional camera. The intro is really slick. He's really, grabbed me into the video. Honestly, after that, a lot of it's going to be more, or the actual leads that you get on the back end are going to be more on the value of the content, as opposed to, okay, he was filming on an iPhone. And this is roughly what it looks like, obviously, without me from behind. So I'm just going to talk you through what's going on here. So basically, obviously, this is where my laptop's connected up. This is the mic, which I just need to position this my mouth. You can have more professional softboxes, but personally, just purely because of space, this isn't Hollywood. So as long as the lighting is nice and flat across your face and looks professional, that's fine. So you can go for these types of panels that I'm going to link below. And what's nice about these is that they're quite light. So you can just literally clamp them onto a desk like that. And so literally the lights, the mic, and even the camera in theory could all be connected to the desk. And so, yeah, just have literally the camera set up with the teleprompter on there. And then how that connects up. So you've literally got the HDMI cable that links through into this connector. That's also where the mic goes. That then goes into my Mac, and then that all gets linked up on Riverside on the computer. And basically, Riverside is a really simple and easy to use tool whereby you connect your camera and your microphone into the computer. You log into the Riverside system, you press record, and away you go. You don't need any SD cards. You don't need anything like that. It's all done via the computer, really, really simple and stored in their system. And you can also invite people to join you for an interview or on a podcast by simply sending them a link and they can join. And that records both your side and their side separately. So then it's easier for the editor to separate it as opposed to recording a Zoom call or Google Meets, whereby it's all merged into one track. And so, yeah, I'd highly recommend using Riverside because it's just a really simple and easy way to film. Okay, so you've got a banging video idea ready to go. You filmed it all. It looks beautiful. What next? Well, don't make the mistake that most people do. They go on Fiverr, hire a random editor who is going to add a load of unnecessary sound effects, music, weird animations that make no sense, and random filters that are going to distract your audience. And now I'm going to let you into the secret of editing in the property niche, not over editing. In most cases, your typical target market is going to be 35, if not more plus, and they're there to learn. So you don't need music. We track feedback on multiple channels and all of them said they preferred videos without music. So keep that in mind. And you don't need sound effects unless they really add something to the mood of the video or they're used for comedic effect. And you don't need lots of shiny, swishy editing when you're starting off. Now, I say this with a slight caveat because property content can be quite data heavy. So I would recommend a certain level of editing in order to clearly get your point across. So say, for example, you're talking through the numbers on a property deal. It is really, really helpful and going to help your audience to understand if you show those figures on the screen. However, if you don't have the budget for an editor, you can actually do this via a screen share, whether that's a spreadsheet, a Miro board, or even a simple Google Slides. You should never let your lack of budget or the lack of budget for an editor stop you from making content. And I want to repeat this just so it's really, really clear because I see so many property channels where the first thing they do is they hire a really expensive editor, where that's the lowest value thing that they can actually do. Your viewers are there to learn about property. So if you start adding in loads of transitions and spend ages working out crazy drone shots, then it's likely just going to confuse them and put them off. You only need to include complex footage, drone shots, and that type of thing if it genuinely adds to the educational value of the video. And if you have a very, very skilled videographer and editor who understands how to put that footage together in a classy way, which 99% of editors on Fiverr and Upwork will not be able to do for you. And I can say that after having worked with over 1,000 video editors, no exaggeration, in the past 10 years, there are probably a handful of people, 0.01% on Upwork or Fiverr, that have the skill level to put that type of complex edit together for you, and they're very expensive. So similar to the thumbnails, the scripting and everything, just keep it simple. And this brings us on to arguably the most important piece of the puzzle. Now, we talked about this earlier, that the big myth about YouTube is that you need hundreds of thousands of views to make money from YouTube. Here we go again. Now, as we established earlier, you do need traffic, but traffic isn't enough. As I mentioned, I helped a channel generate hundreds of thousands of views and it translated into £0 of revenue. Whereas you can get 1,000 views a video and turn YouTube into an absolute lead generating machine if you have your backend systems set up correctly. So let's have a look at how that actually works. So to recap, the funnel that we're setting up for our viewers is content. They click on a lead magnet, they download the lead magnet or they book a call directly, and in exchange we get their email address or phone number. Now, if you're a bigger company with more resources, you can proactively call everyone that downloads one of your lead magnets, provided that lead magnet is a good enough indicator they're interested in your service. For example, if you're offering people access to a tool that helps them calculate rental yield on a property, it's likely they're an investor and probably worth calling up. Whereas if the lead magnet is a house price update, they could just be a casual viewer, so it might be a waste of time. Now, regardless of what option you take, we now have their email address. And unlike YouTube, where we're dependent on the algorithm, the email gives us control of what they see, and we can determine how often we email them. Now, some people get weirded out or think this sounds icky, but if you have a serious problem that needs fixing, or you're proactively trying to learn a skill or inform yourself about a topic, you want as much information on that topic as you can get. And there are lots of different schools of thought about this, but it's not unreasonable to email people once a day, particularly if the emails are value-driven and genuinely helpful. This is something that people often overlook, and they get so caught up in the views on YouTube and the front end that they completely forget about the back end, but that's actually where a lot of the money is to be made. So here's a simple hack for you. The next time you spend hours and hours filming a YouTube video, take the transcript or the script, which already has tons of information in it, and upload it to ChatGPT. Then use the prompt in the description along with our email templates, this is all in the YouTube Property Playbook, to generate emails based on the content that you provide it. And it's basically going to spit out a load of written content that you can use not only on email, but also for X or Twitter, or wherever it's called, LinkedIn, filming shorts, and all sorts of short form content. So remember, be smart with the content you create and treat every single email or phone number you collect like a potential customer, not just a random piece of data. Now, I promised somewhere in the middle of the video that I would teach you how to keep your viewers binging on your content, and this is that moment. So everything I've covered in this video is an overview of the process. However, if you really want to blow up your business using YouTube, you're going to need more concrete examples and guidance. So I'm going to produce a series of videos on each step of the production process that you can find up here. All I'm doing here is giving you a good reason to watch the next video with 3 simple steps. 1, rehook me. Why is this important or relevant? 2, up the stakes. What results will it get me? And why should I take the action? And then 3, call to action. What is the next video you want me to click on? And if you get somebody to watch the next video, it adds to your watch time and keeps your potential clients binging even more. So if the content's available, go and click up here. And if you're one of the first people seeing this video, I would recommend subscribing and turning on the notifications so you can be the first to know when all of that content is available. Cheers.